This is the perfect opportunity for me to put together a more cohesive video on my methods of reskinning one of my Tirana doors. I'm going to start off with the door shell itself that has been media blasted and coated in epoxy primer, and it's pretty good, it's pretty clean, but there is some rust pitting to deal with, some pinholes, some cracks around mounting holes, and before I move on to the next stage, I've got to make sure that the frame, the shell is solid. Then after that, it's time to prepare the door skin itself. So the inside, I need to get rid of all that crappy black paint because it doesn't stick. Prep it up, put some epoxy primer on it. Also have to weld in the weather strip sort of brace that is on one of these cars. And then my method of putting that door skin on the shell, hammering the flanges over, test fitting, setting up the gaps, those sort of things. So hopefully you can get something out of it, whether it's any tips and tricks or whether you just like seeing this sort of work and you like to sit back and chill and watch it. So let's get straight into it. I'm going to remake this area here. So I've cut out a strip of mild steel here and bent it on the vise with some angle line, and the air hammer does a pretty good job and it keeps it nice and straight. So as you can see, it'll go like that. I'm gonna have to make it in a couple bits because I don't have a massive length of angle line. Mark out the holes for the weather strip and I'll punch them out. Chop, weld, and clean up. The repaired brace is now in epoxy primer, and same with the inside of the door skin. So to prep the door skin, I used 80 grit on a DA sander, buzzed the whole thing down, all the little edges and corners and hard to reach areas Where I couldn't get the sandpaper, I used my spot sandblaster with just a cheap one with the hopper on the top with a bit of garnet media, and I just went around the edges. That gave it some good tooth for the primer to stick, as well as get rid of all the remaining crappy paint that was left in there. So now what's left to do with this skin is punch some holes in the top flange here where this gets plug welded onto. Do that and then I can move on to the door shell. Okay, so door skin's fitting all right, just needs some tension here to bring it up to where it needs to be. That's all good. Same over here. But before I do too much with the door skin, as you can see, I've marked out some problem areas where the metal is thin. I think that used to be a spot weld, pinholes and welds, little crack in there. I don't know what the hell happened here. That was covered up by a massive washer, so I'm gonna have to remake that. Very minute, but I'll have to grind away the primer just to see what I've got working with there. Might just get a bit of a copper block underneath and weld it up, and that should be fine. If it keeps blowing out, I'm just gonna have to make a bigger repair, no problems. Same here. The other side of the shell will tell more of the story. This needs to be opened up, so when the inner brace gets welded, or plug welded here, so little mark there. Once again, drilling out spot welds, they need to be filled up. Tiny little breakthroughs there. So underneath will tell the story there. And this corner is usually an issue in most Tiranas. Now, this isn't that bad. So I'm gonna see whether I can get away with welding those up. And that's all good. Or maybe the problem is actually more widespread. So I've done a repair like this before. I'm going to start with this repair. One thing I have noticed is I need to make sure that is in the same spot over here. Otherwise the mechanism inside won't line up. So I have noticed in this mess, there's a quarter of that hole. So I need to make sure I reference that. With any luck, it should fall somewhere in the ballpark. Okay, so I just removed the epoxy primer to reveal the area which is most pitted. Now this section is really strong actually. You don't see much pitting from the other side, but there is a few divots as you can see here. The inside of the shells have been sandblasted, so you'd assume it's all clean in here. As you can see, once I wire wheeled the epoxy off, it looks nice and clean under there. So rather than chop this out, weld a new piece, so what I want to try with this pitting here is TIG braze silicon bronze. It'll actually flow out and attach itself to the metal. Not so much welding, but brazing. This is what I've got so far. I'm filling in the pitting and the voids with the silicon bronze TIG wire. It's the actual rod is 1.6 millimeter. I'm using a 1.6 millimeter tungsten sharpened at about 15 degrees. The longer, the sharper the tungsten is, will give it a wider cone, and that is more beneficial for low amp welding. This is low amps. I've got about 22 to 23 amps on the welder. I'm not using a pedal, I'm just using a button. That seems to be working well. And the actual base material is not pulling up. I'm heating it up, and then once it's heated up sufficiently, I dab the silicon bronze rod and it'll just sort of flow out like melted butter. Let me just give this a clean up with the wire wheel and we'll see how we're looking. So there it is, nice and thick, it's like glue. And underneath, we haven't blown holes. There's obviously a heat affected zone underneath as well. That's bound to happen because you are heating the material. So I'll keep going and then sand it down and see how she looks. What do you think of that? Seems to work pretty good. Can you notice the dark grey in amongst the gold? That's sort of like a high spot. So the silicon bronze is sitting inside those pits, and as I've sanded it as flat as I could get it, it's kind of like a guide coat. So anyway, I've got heaps more to do here. I've obviously got all around here to do, make that a little bit nicer. Up here I'll do a little bit. Maybe some on the other side. Now that most of the little detail repairs on this door shell have been done, it's now time to concentrate on the big one, this corner here. This one's actually not too bad. There's just a couple little pinholes and I could weld them up and everything would be all right. But knowing what I know and this sort of vintage car, they always seem to rust down in this corner. So I'll be cutting that cap off, gaining access to the inner brace because they usually rust out as well, and just seeing what I've got to work with. It'll be interesting to see what the underside of this section looks like, whether I can just sandblast it and fix up the rust holes, or whether I have to remake a piece.
turned out very good, really solid and non-destructive. Now for the inside bit, I've already sandblasted it and dipped it in some rust converter. As you can see, there is some pitting on the backside, not too much. Here's obviously where it got really thin and a bit of a pinhole, but I'll do the same process. Clean it up a bit with a wire wheel and silicone bronze it. Then I can clean the whole piece up, throw some primer on it and weld it back on.
Okay, so I've got the skin 90% of the way hammered on. You would have seen earlier on in the piece, I put the skin on the frame, put the frame on the car, and I did that just so I could find the best place for the skin, because there is quite a bit of movement, you know, left and right, up and down, and I wanted to make sure that I could get some reference marks of where would be the best place to sit in relation to the gaps around the door frame there, give me the best gap for down here at the sill, and to make sure these body lines actually matched up with the front guard and the rear quarter. And when I was happy with that, I marked it. I just tacked it on just so it wouldn't move and started hammering the flanges down. So this is what it looks like now. It's fitting not too bad. Of course, this is the part now where I have to tweak it, make sure the door is sitting 100%, and make sure where I've hammered over it's not diving in or it's not sort of pulling out. And then, yeah, work on the gaps, work on this filler piece. There's still heaps to do, but the skin is on the frame, and that's probably the most important thing right now. Bit of hammering, pushing, pulling, trying to get the edge of the door skin as flat as possible in line with the quarter panel. I've got the door lined up where the gap around the window frame is most consistent. So it doesn't need to go that way or that way anymore. So it's in the middle. So I'll get a bit of tape and I want to lay the tape so the edge of the tape is at the finish end of the panel. So it does take a bit of trial and error, a bit of eyeballing. So I want about 5mm gap. So this shows me where I'd need to grind down. And where I'd need to add. So when I apply the tape back onto that line, you can see all the excess I need to grind down. Right, so working my way down the edge of the door. It's all pretty much MIG welded all the way down and roughly grinded flat. I've got to take the door off, put it on the stand and do a bit of hammering, do a bit of cleaning up. But also when I removed the paint in this quarter panel, there's a lot of dents and stuff in this area. So I've already worked this area here, straightened it out with the dent puller, hammer and dolly, shrinking disc. That's looking pretty good. Started around here, just pulling up some lows, some highs there I need to knock down and need to finish down the bottom here. But what I wanted, I fixed this area first because I didn't want the dents all along the edge here to mess with the door alignment. So there's that, that's where I'm up to. This side isn't bad, it's just a little bit wide throughout the middle here. And then it sort of closes in. There is still adjustment for the front guard. And there's a big gap there, but I will be making that new piece over here, like I did on the other side. So that can wait, I'll just sort out the rear quarter section first.
After a whole load of stretching the edge because the door was diving in, and a bit of shrinking and knocking down the stretching, I've got it to a point where I'm fairly happy. The problem is down the bottom was either sticking out too much, the middle was flush, the top was sticking out too much, or vice versa, or the top was too far in. It was a whole lot of mucking around, but it's much better now. A lot of adjusting of the edge of the door. You know, it was like this at one stage, and then it was diving too much. But the thing is, I can't get it 100% flat, because being 100% flat on a door would mean that it wouldn't be flush up against the quarter panel, so a bit of give and take needed. But that's what the gap looks like. But I've just removed the striker, lifted up the door so it's actually sitting on its own weight without the striker. So what I need to do now with this top corner here is cut the tack off and lift the top part up a little bit so it lines up with the quarter panel a bit better. That seems to follow the contour just a little bit nicer.
That concludes this video where I wanted to take you through, for fuck's sake. That concludes this video where I wanted to take you through my process of getting the door shell ready, putting a new skin on, do the initial tuning of the skin and getting the gaps right, and just making sure that it's all sitting where it should be. So I'm pretty happy. I'm probably about 90% happy, pretty much ready for some epoxy primer. So before I do that, I'm going to continue going around the car. As you can see, I've removed the paint on the driver's rear quarter panel. There's quite a lot of straightening to do there, so I'll be focusing on that. And once we get to the point where I'm happy with all the metalwork, then start looking at applying some epoxy primer to seal it all up. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a difficult one to make, because I just wanted to get stuck into the job, but I hope there's enough footage to appease you. Thank you very much. We'll see you at the next one. Cheers. Sweet.
Just a bonus little video here for you. This is the passenger door, and I had noticed that the actual frame was like this part here sort of was pushed in, and I was wondering why this flange wasn't straight. It was sort of diving in, and it was pulling the body line in as well. So I just reliefed it. So I sliced it where, well, you can see here, this cut line, that's how the panel, the inside of the panel went. It should be straight. And then it sort of went up and down. So it makes sense because this door was sideswiped when I bought the car. So I've sliced it, sort of hammered it, and now with my straight edge, it's looking better. Once I put some pressure, don't have enough hands. Once I put some pressure on here, it'll straighten up. So you got to do these things, otherwise it just wouldn't sit right, especially up against a sill. The silicone bronze TIG rod